So here I'm going to be taking a look at the parts of the motor mount. This is the motor mount that's on the passenger side up at the top of the engine. And as you can see, there's a lot of pieces to it. This aluminum piece here, this is what attaches to the block or the front of the engine. And it attaches with 3 fasteners. There's a stud right here. It's threaded, and this nut threads onto the back here like that, or the front. And these large bolts go in through the timing cover and into the block. And so this is the main part here of the main supporting part of the motor mount. And I'll tell you about the bolts here. These bolts, I think these are 17 millimeter bolts, or 17 millimeter hex drives. And the bolt overall is 128 millimeters long, and the actual threaded part is about 38 millimeters, and there's 2 of them here. And then there's the nut, and the nut is also a 17 millimeter nut. So that takes care of fastening this aluminum piece to the engine. And then from here, this piece here is the rubber isolator. And as you can see, it's got one pressed in fastener on this side, and then there's a matching pressed in fastener here on this side. And on these were highly corroded and a little difficult to get off. And the nuts, so when you put this together, it would go in together like that, and that would help you guide the engine into place. You can see they're beveled or sharpened at the tip of the bolts, and that would allow you to fit it into position. And then as it gets down closer, it would come into alignment. And so then there'd be these nuts here. There'd be one on the top here, and you can see they drop down and then thread. And then there's one here, drops up and threads. And then there's this bolt here that goes right into the top. So I'll go over these bolts. Let's see, this bolt is this is a 14 millimeter bolt, and it's about 22 millimeters long. And these 2 nuts here are 14 millimeter drive. And these, I guess if these were damaged, you could probably just use regular bolts. But the overall on that is about 70 millimeters. And the threaded part, the actual thread is up here at about 22, but then it goes on down. There's a thread removed here and sharpened, and that part is about 33 millimeters. And so what happens is you have this piece bolted to the engine, and this rubber isolator then would drop down in. And there's a cradle here that's welded to the body, and I'll show you that. But then there's also okay, so there's the 2 nuts and this bolt here, and then there's also this piece here. It's like another support that goes on top, and it also has 2 bolts that go again into the block. And then there's another bolt that ties it into the top here, right there. And so that's basically the mount there. So these bolts here, these are 14 millimeter drives, and overall they're 51 millimeters long, but they've got the thread removed. Looks like about maybe 6 millimeters of thread is being removed. I guess that helps you get it into the block and helps you thread it, and helps it guide maybe. And so then so there's two of those bolts. Then there's this this bolt here that goes on the top. You can see there's a red or this yellow marking, and there was a yellow marking there on the bolt head. This is also a 14 millimeter, and this bolt is about 23 millimeters long, and it's got some of the thread is removed at the front. Maybe 3 millimeters is removed. So there's all the fasteners. There's quite a few fasteners just to get this assembly out. And then there's also this long bolt here. This bolt here goes through this rubber isolator, and it goes through the cradle and is locked in with this nut here. And so if you want to remove the engine, the first thing you do is jack up the bottom of the engine a little bit so you can remove the tension off of this bolt, and you can see it lift off. And when this is loose, once you loosen this, you'll be able to see that the bolt, when the weight is off of it, it'll spin a lot easier. So this is also this is a 14 millimeter bolt head, and the nut is also 14 millimeter. And the length of this bolt overall is about 112 maybe, 112 millimeters, and it's got about 31 millimeters of thread, but the leading part of the thread is removed. Maybe 6 millimeters of that is removed, and I suppose that helps you get it into squared into the nut. Then you spin it. I don't know. Okay, now we're going to look at the this piece here. There's actually some rubber dampers here. These slide off, and they're keyed also, so you can't really get it wrong. I guess maybe you could get it wrong. Let's see if I put it over here. Yeah, if you put it over here, it won't work. Unless you turn it upside down, then it's kind of obvious which way it was going to go. And then you can get into this is the actual isolator right here. And what you want to do is inspect to make sure it's still welded or bonded to the metal piece here. This is a rubber piece here through the steel. You can see it's like a steel sleeve, and it's got a hard rubber piece, and that's how the bolt would go in. And it does allow it to move a little bit. You can see there's some movement in it. And it'd be interesting to know how they figured out they need these little damper. They're weighted on the bottom. It'd be interesting to know how much that really had an effect. It doesn't really seem like it would have much an effect to me. Maybe every little bit does, but anyway, I'm sure they wouldn't have put it on there if it didn't serve a purpose. So that's a look at the motor mount, and I'll also show you where this all mounts onto the in the car. I'll go ahead and temporarily put this thing together. Let's see, this one goes here. I guess these two bolts are the same, so it doesn't really matter. And there's these two nuts here that go, one on the bottom and one on the top. I actually needed an impact driver to get these off. They were kind of locked in, I guess, from the corrosion. And there's this piece here. It'll go up there. And of course, there's the bolt and the nut. And these long bolts, they'll go in there. Of course, you can't really get that off until you get this out of the way. You can see there's the interference there, and then the nut goes there. And then these two bolts also go right here. And so looking at the cradle, this is the sheet metal cradle right here that accepts the engine mount. And so right now you're looking at the front of the engine without the engine mount in place. And you can see the cadmium plated bolt down there. That's the stud sticking out. That's the one that the motor mount bolts to. And then there's 4 holes along the front there. And you can see this. I've just got this pulled out of its holder so it can be moved around a little bit. This here is the sheet metal bracket that supports the front of the engine, or this side of the engine anyway. And you see it's basically welded into the body, the unibody. It's not anything you can remove or get out of the way. Not a lot of room for working in there.